Welcome to this chapter by chapter reading of the Montessori Method by Dr. Maria Montessori. When I was starting my Montessori school, I turned directly to Dr. Montessori's original writings, partly out of conviction and partly because they were available in the public domain and free. What I didn't realize at the time was I was reading the original English translation commissioned while Dr. Montessori was still alive, translated in 1912 by Anne E. George. Later, I discovered that many of us have encountered Montessori through later translations, especially the 1967 version, which helped spread the method widely in the US, and for which I'm personally grateful. But returning to the original text, I found something more: Dr. Montessori's full voice, her depth, her vision, and her spiritual and philosophical foundations. In this podcast, I'm reading the original translation chapter by chapter, adding reflections to help connect her words to today's classrooms and families. This is an experiment, an adventure, and a shared journey of learning. Let's begin. Hi, welcome to Chapter 8 of the Montessori Method by Dr. Maria Montessori. This is the 1912 translation by Anne E. George. I am Melissa Rohan. I am the founder and head of school here at Waterfront Academy. And today's chapter is Refection, the child's diet. This is an incredibly interesting chapter because it is a nice snapshot of how different life is from 100 years ago, but how much it's the same. This chapter was written because of Dr. Maria Montessori's deep concern in the well-being of children from impoverished families. She was concerned that they were malnourished and there was real hunger. Excuse me. And that is super important before I start reading this to understand that. So a little bit of context, because I think that we are still today very concerned about the nutrition of children, especially children from poverty. But the concern is different because in the 1920s, this is 1912, in the 1920s, in the United States, that was when the boom of these foods that were ultra processed kind of happened. It was the explosion of industrialized and ultra processed foods, and so she wasn't speaking of that, but we do today speak of that because even though food is plentiful, which is kind of what really kind of urged or moved the needle on that industrialized, ultra-processed food, was so that we could provide food in plenty for those who couldn't access food. And now access is not really a problem. It's the access to good quality, whole foods that is the problem. And so now you have just issues with children who, excuse me, are lacking in eating foods that are lacking in nutritional value. At times, it's the safety of it. And so then there's also long-term health impacts. So the concern is similar in a lot of ways. It's just not identical. And so when I read this, understand that this is a different time. It's a different, also that I think that they're different foods that we wouldn't necessarily eat now. And so I just wanted to keep that in mind. Also in this chapter, she does talk a lot about the children preparing the fruit, cultivating and harvesting vegetables, caring for animals like chickens and goats, and then the older children learning to milk these goats and collection of the eggs. And so these activities are not about self-sufficiency alone, but they're about connecting and responsibility and respect for life. So it's connecting that the food and understanding the flow of farm to table. And when you have that, the children actually really appreciate and enjoy the food more. Humans appreciate and understand the food more and enjoy the food more if they are actively participating on how it got to the table. So it's not just about that alone, but she also talks about in this chapter the preparation of the table and the linens, also being part of community, being a part of the process of the food coming to the table, being a part of and just learning the nomenclature behind it. So some modern parallels to those types of things would be snack and meal preparation in the classroom, school gardens and composting, a farm to table programs that we can participate in as a school and as a community, emphasis on whole foods and mindful eating. So even though we no longer raise goats on campuses, the spirit of involvement remains essential. So this is just really a reminder of looking at the whole child, and it reinforces Dr. Montessori's holistic vision. Education is not only intellectual, but it's but a child who is hungry, undernourished, or disconnected from basic human processes cannot fully thrive. You cannot learn if you are hungry. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you'll learn something because children are built to learn, but you really can't live in that full potential and learn in that full potential and participate in that full potential if you're hungry or malnourished. So maybe instead of looking at this as like, oh, we need to follow Dr. Montessori's diet, we really need to look at just maybe ensuring that all children have access to healthy foods and maybe just changing a mind shift in the attitude towards food. So that's my thoughts. Excuse me, those are my thoughts on today's chapter. So with that, let's go ahead and start reading chapter 8, Reflection, the Child's Diet. In connection with the exercises of practical life, it may be fitting to consider the matter of refection. I'm sorry, I kept on saying reflection. It's refection. Sorry, the matter of refection. In order to protect the children's development, especially in neighborhoods where standards of child hygiene are not yet prevalent in the home, it would be well if a large part, at least, of the child's diet could be entrusted to the school. It is well known today that the diet must be adapted to the physical nature of the child, and as the medicine of children, it is not the medicine of adults in reduced doses. So the diet must not be that of the adult in lesser quantitative proportions, but for this reason I should prefer that even in the children's house, which are situated in tenements, of which little ones, being at home, can go up to eat with the family, school refection should be instituted. Moreover, even in the case of rich children, school refection would always be advisable until a scientific course in cooking shall have introduced into the wealthier families the habit of specializing in children's food. The diet of little children must be rich in fats and sugar, the first for reserved matter and the second for plastic tissue. In fact, sugar is a stimulant to tissues in the process of formation. As for the form of preparation, it is well that the alimentary substances should always be minced because the child has not yet the capacity for completely masticating the food, and his stomach is still incapable of fulfilling the function of mincing food matter. Consequently, soups, purees, and meatballs should constitute the ordinary form of dish for the child's table. The nitrogenous diet for a child from 2 or 3 years of age ought to be constituted chiefly of milk and eggs, but after the second year, broths are also to be recommended. After 3 years and a half, meat can be given, or in the case of poor children, vegetables. Fruits are also to be recommended for children. Perhaps a detailed summary on child diet may be useful, especially for mothers. Method of preparing broth for little children, age 3 to 6. After that, the child may use the common broth of the family. The quality of meat of broth should correspond to 1 gram for every cubic centimeter of broth and should be put in cold water. No aromatic herbs should be used, and only wholesome condiment being salt. The meat should be left to boil for 2 hours. Instead of removing the grease from the broth, it is well to add butter to it, or, in the case of the poor, a spoonful of olive oil. But substitutes for butter, such as margarine, etc., should never be used. The broth must be prepared fresh. It would be well, therefore, to put the meat on the fire 2 hours before the meal, because as soon as broth is cool, there begins to take place a separation of chemical substances which are injurious to the child and may easily cause diarrhea. Soups. A very simple soup, and one to be highly recommended for children, is bread boiled in salt water or in broth and abundantly seasoned with oil. This is the classic soup of poor children and an excellent means of nutrition. Very like this is the soup which consists of little cubes of bread toasted in butter and allowed to soak in the broth, which itself fat with butter. Soups of grated bread also belong in this class. Pastine, especially the glutinous pastine, which are of the same nature, are undoubtedly superior to the others for digestibility, but are accessible only to the privileged social classes. The poor should know how much more wholesome is the broth made from remnants of stale bread. Then soups, of course, spaghetti, often dry and seasoned with meat juice. Such soups are most indigestible for little children. Excellent soups are those consisting of purees of vegetables, beans, peas, lentils. Today, one may find in the shops dried vegetables, especially adapted for this sort of soups. Boiled in salt water, the vegetables are peeled, put to cool, and passed through a sieve, or simply compressed if they're already peeled. Butter is then added, and the paste is stirred slowly into the boiling water, care being taken that it dissolves and leaves no lumps. Vegetable soups can also be seasoned with pork instead of broth. Sugared milk may be the base of vegetable puree. I strongly recommend for children a soup of rice boiled in broth or milk. Also, cornmeal broth, provided it be seasoned with abundant butter, but not with cheese. The porridge form, polenta, really cornmeal mush, is to be highly recommended on account for the long cooking. The poorer classes who have no meat broth can feed their children equally well with soups of boiled bread and porridge seasoned with oil, milk, and eggs. These foods, which not only contain nitrogenous substances in an eminently digestible form, but they have the so-called enzymes which facilitate assimilation into the tissues and hence, in a particular way, favor the growth of the child. And they answer so much the better this last most important condition if they are fresh and intact, keeping in themselves, one may say, the life of the animals which produced them. Milk, fresh from the cow, and the egg, while it's still warm, are assimilable to the highest degree. Cooking, on the other hand, makes the milk and eggs lose their special conditions of assimilability and reduces the nutritive power in them to the simple power of any nitrogenous substance. Today, consequently, there are being found special dairies for children where the milk produced is sterile. The rigorous cleanliness of the surroundings in which the milk-producing animal live, the sterilization of the udder before milking, and the hands of the milker, and the vessels which to contain the milk, are hermetic sealing of these last, and the refrigerating bath immediately after the milking. If the milk is to be carried far, otherwise it is well to drink it warm, procure milk free from bacteria, which therefore has no need of being sterilized by boiling, and which preserves intact its natural nutritive powers. As much may be said of eggs. The best way of feeding them to children is to take them still warm from the hen and have him eat them just as they are, and then digest them in the open air. But where this is not practicable, eggs must be chosen fresh and barely heated in water, that is to say, prepared à la coque. All other forms of preparation, milk soup, omelets, and so forth, do, to be sure, make of milk and eggs an excellent food, more to be recommended than others, but they take away the specific properties of assimilation which characterize them. Meat. All meats are not adapted to children, and even their preparation must differ according to the age of the child. Thus, for example, children from 3 to 5 years of age ought to eat only more or less finely ground meat, whereas at the age of 5, children are capable of grinding meat completely by mastication. At that time, it is well to teach the child accordingly or accurately how to masticate, because he has a tendency to swallow food quickly, which may produce indigestion and diarrhea. This is another reason why school refection in the children's house would be a very serviceable as well as convenient institution, as the whole diet of the child could then be rationally cared for in connection with the educative system of the houses. The meats most adapted to children are so-called white meats, that is, in the first place, chicken, then veal, also the light flesh of fish, sole, pike, and cod. After the age of 4, fillet of beef may also be introduced into the diet, but never heavy and fat meats like that of the pig, the capon, the eel, the tunny, etc., which are to be absolutely excluded among with mollusks and crustaceans, oysters, lobsters, from the child's diet. Croquettes made of finely ground meat, grated bread, milk, and beaten eggs, and fried in butter are the most wholesome preparation. Another excellent preparation is to mold into balls the grated meat with sweet fruit preserve and eggs beaten up with sugar. At the age of 5, the child may be given breast of roast fowl and occasionally veal cutlet or fillet of beef. Boiled meat must never be given to the child, because meat is deprived of many stimulating and even nutritive properties by boiling and rendered less digestible. Nerve-feeding substances. Besides meat, a child who has reached the age of 4 may be given fried brains and sweetbreads to be combined, for example, with chicken croquettes. Milk foods. All cheeses are to be excluded from the child's diet. The only milk product suitable for to children from 3 to 6 of age is fresh butter. Custard. Custard is also to be recommended provided it be freshly prepared, that is, immediately before being eaten, and with very fresh milk and eggs. If such conditions cannot be regularly fulfilled, it is preferable to do without custard, which is not necessary. Bread. From what we have said about soups, it may be inferred that bread is an excellent food for the child. It should be well selected. The crumb is not very digestible, but it can be utilized, when it is dry, to make a bread broth. But if one is to give the child simply a piece of bread to eat, it is well to offer him the crust, the end of the loaf. Bread sticks are excellent for those who can afford them. Bread contains many nutrigenous substances and is very rich in starches, but is lacking in fats, and as the fundamental substances of diets are, as is well known, 3 in number, namely proteids, nutrigenous substances, starches, and fats. Bread is not a complete food. It is necessary, therefore, to offer the child buttered bread, which constitutes a complete food and may be considered as a sufficient and complete breakfast. Green vegetables. Children must never eat raw vegetables, such as salads and greens, but only cooked ones. Indeed, they are not to be highly recommended either cooked or raw, with the exception of spinach, which may enter with moderation into the diet of children. Potatoes prepared in a puree with much butter form, however, an excellent complement of nutrition for children. Fruits. Among fruits, there are excellent foods for children. They, too, like milk and eggs, if freshly gathered, retain a living quality which aids assimilation. As this condition, however, is not easily attainable in cities, it is necessary to consider also the diet of fruit, which are not perfectly fresh and which therefore should be prepared and cooked in various ways. All fruits are not to be advised for children. The chief properties to be considered are the degree of ripeness, the tenderness and sweetness of the pulp, and its acidity. Peaches, apricots, grapes, currants, oranges, and mandarins, in their natural state, can be given to little children with great advantage. Other fruits, such as pears, apples, plums, should be cooked or prepared in syrup. Figs, pineapples, dates, melons, cherries, walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts, and chestnuts are excluded for various reasons from the diet in early childhood. The preparation of fruit must consist in removing from it all indigestible parts, such as the peel, and also such parts as the child inadvertently may absorb to his detriment, as for example, the seed. Children of 4 or 5 should be taught clearly how carefully the seeds must be thrown away and how the fruits are peeled. Afterwards, the child so educated may be promoted to the honor of receiving a fine fruit intact, and he will know how to eat it properly. The culinary preparation of fruits consists essentially in 2 processes: cooking and seasoning with sugar. Besides simple cooking, fruits may be prepared as marmalades and jellies, which are excellent but are naturally within the reach of the wealthier classes only. While jellies and marmalades may be allowed, candied fruits, on the other hand, marrons glacés, and the like, are absolutely excluded from the child's diet. Seasonings. An important phase of the hygiene of child diet concerns seasonings, with a view to their rigorous limitation. As I have already indicated, sugar and some fat substances, along with kitchen salt, sodium chloride, should constitute the principal part of the seasonings. To these may be added organic acids, acetic acid, citric acid, that is, vinegar and lemon juice. This latter can be advantageous used on fish or croquettes or spinach, etc. Other condiments suitable to little children are some aromatic vegetables like garlic and rue, which disinfect the intestines and the lungs and also have a direct anthelmintic action. Spices, on the other hand, such as pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon, clove, and especially mustard, are to be absolutely abolished. Drinks. The growing organism of the child is very rich in water, and hence needs a constant supply of moisture. Among the beverages, the best, and indeed the only one, to be unreservedly advised is pure, fresh spring water. Too rich children might be allowed the so-called table water, which are slightly alkaline, such as those from San Genomene, Aqua Claudia, etc., mixed with syrups as, for example, syrup of black cherry. It is now a matter of general knowledge that all fermented beverages and those exciting to the nervous system are injurious to children. Hence, all alcoholic and caffeinated beverages are absolutely eliminated from child's diet. Not only liquors, but wine and beer ought to be unknown to the child's taste, and coffee and tea should be inaccessible to childhood. The deleterious action of alcohol on child organism needs no illustration, but in a matter of such vital importance, insistent repetition is never superfluous. Alcohol is a poison especially fatal to organisms in the process of formation. Not only does it arrest their total development, whence infantilism, idiocy, but also predisposes the child to nervous maladies, epilepsy, meningitis, and to maladies of the digestive organs and metabolism, cirrhosis of the liver, dyspepsia, anemia. If the Children's House were to succeed in enlightening the people on such truths, they would be accomplishing a very lofty hygienic work for the new generations. Instead of coffee, children may be given roasted and boiled barley, malt, and especially chocolate, which is an excellent child food, particularly when mixed with milk. Distribution of the meals. Another chapter of child diet concerns the distribution of the meals. Here, one principle must dominate and must be diffused among mothers, namely, that the children shall be kept in rigorous meal hours in order that they might enjoy good health and have excellent digestion. It is true that there prevails among the people, and it is one of the forms of maternal ignorance most fatal to children, the prejudice that children, in order to grow, must be eating almost continuously, without regularity, nibbling almost habitually on a crust of bread. On the contrary, the child, in view of the special delicacy of his digestive system, has more need of regular meals than the adult has. It seems to me that the Children's House with very prolonged programs are, for this reason, suitable places for child culture, as they can direct the child's diet. Outside of the regular meal hours, children should not eat. In a Children's House with a long program, there ought to be 2 meals, a hearty one about noon and a light one about 4 in the afternoon. At the hearty meal, there should be soup, a meat dish, and bread, and in the case of rich children, also fruit or custard and butter on the bread. At the 4 o'clock meal, there should be prepared a light lunch, which from a simple piece of bread can range a buttered bread and to bread accompanied by a fruit marmalade, chocolate, honey, custard, etc. Crisp crackers, biscuits, and cooked fruits, etc. might also be useful employed. Very suitably, the lunch might consist of bread soaked in milk or an egg a la coque with bread sticks, also a simple cup of milk in which is dissolved a spoonful of Mellon's food. I recommend Mellon's food very highly, not only in infancy, but also much later on account of its properties of digestibility and nutrition, and account of its flavor, which is so pleasing to children. Mellon's food is a powder prepared from barley and wheat and containing in a concentrated, pure state, the nutritive substances proper to those cereals. The powder is slowly dissolved in hot water in the bottom of the same cup, which is to be used for drinking the mixture, and very fresh milk is then poured on top. The child would take the other 2 meals in his own home, that is, the morning breakfast and the supper, which latter must be very light for children so that shortly after they may be ready to go to bed. On these meals, it would be well to give advice to mothers, urging them to help complete the hygienic work of the children's house to the profit of their children. The morning breakfast for the rich might be milk and chocolate, or milk and extract of malt with crackers, or better with toasted bread spread with butter or honey. For the poor, a cup of milk with bread. For the evening meal, a soup is to be advised. Children should eat soup twice a day, and an egg a la coque, or a cup of milk or rice soup with the base of milk and buttered bread with cooked fruits, etc. As for the elementary rations to be calculated, I refer the reader to the special treatise on hygiene, although practically all such calculations are of no great utility. In the children's house, especially in the case of the poor, I should make extensive use of the vegetable soups, and I should have cultivated in the garden plots vegetables which can be used in the diet in order to have them plucked in their freshness, cooked and enjoyed. I should try possibly to do the same for the fruits, and by the raising of animals to have fresh eggs and pure milk. The milking of the goats could be done directly by the larger children after they had scrupulously washed their hands. Another important educative application which school refection in the children's house has to offer, and which concerns practical life, consists in the preparing of the table, arranging the table linen, learning its nomenclature, etc. Later, I shall show how this exercise can gradually increase in difficulty and constitute a more important didactic instrument. It is sufficient to intimate here that it is very important to teach the children to eat with cleanliness, both with respect to themselves and with respect to their surroundings, not to soil the napkin, etc., and to use the table implements, which, at least for the little ones, are limited to the spoon, and for the larger children extended to the fork and knife. That concludes this chapter of the Montessori Method. Thank you for listening and for taking part in this journey with me. This project is very much an exploration. If you have thoughts to add, questions to ask, or if you think I misunderstood or missed something important, I genuinely want to hear from you. Please message me, share your reflections, or continue the conversation with fellow listeners. On a quest to learning, relearning, and engaging deeply with Dr. Montessori's work as we go. Join me next time as we continue chapter by chapter.